The air in the Lincoln County Town Hall wasn't just stale. It was septic. It smelled of old coffee, wet wool, and a new, metallic kind of panic that had gripped the valley for a week. Every seat was taken. Farmers in clean denim sat stiffly next to town merchants in pressed shirts, their faces pale and drawn. At the front, under the fluorescent hum, a young, nervous-looking man from the Environmental Protection Agency clicked to the next slide. "As you know," the EPA man said, his voice amplified by the crackling microphone. "The die-off in the Clear Creek Reservoir has been catastrophic. We've also registered 14 cases of acute illness, all downstream." A low murmur of fear rippled through the crowd. "We have, however, pinpointed the source of the contamination." He clicked again. A map appeared, showing the valley. "Our upstream tests, near the new Terra Prime facility, are all clean." A sigh of relief went through half the room. The new plant was the town's economic lifeline. "The contamination," the agent continued, his voice tight, "begins here." He clicked, and a bright, angry red cloud appeared on the map. It was centered on a small, insignificant tributary. This tributary, which feeds directly into the reservoir, shows concentrations 100 times the acceptable limit. The plume originates from the property line of Croft Organics. A single sharp gasp was heard. Then, silence. John Silas Croft, 68 years old, his knuckles white on the wooden bench, felt the blood drain from his face. "What?" he breathed. "The specific chemical," the EPA agent said, looking at his notes, "is a banned organophosphate, compound 7, highly toxic." The whisper that followed was not one of fear. It was one of judgment. It started in the back row and moved forward like a wave. "Compound 7, my God. That's the one. That's what killed Clara." Silas felt the eyes of the entire town turn on him. They weren't just looking at a man. They were looking at a monster. The EPA agent, oblivious to the social execution he had just performed, looked up, his gaze finding Silas in the crowd. "Mr. Croft, your land is the source. The contamination is coming from you." Silas shot to his feet, his chair crashing backward. "That's a lie," he roared, his voice the old gravel of a Marine gunnery sergeant. "A damn lie. I'm organic." "I haven't. I wouldn't." But his words were drowned out by a different, louder voice from the front row. "And Frank," someone yelled. "What about Frank, Silas? He's dying." "You're killing him." Silas froze. The accusation, now complete, hung in the air. That he, Silas Croft, in a desperate bid to save his farm, had used the very chemical he'd sworn had killed his wife, and in doing so he was now killing her brother. The trap, sprung with scientific precision, was perfect. To understand how a man could be accused of such a thing, you have to understand the land. Silas Croft's farm wasn't just a business. It was a memorial. It was a war. For 4 generations, the Crofts had farmed this valley. Silas, a hard-bitten, stubborn man carved from the local granite, had run it with his wife, Clara, for 40 years. They had run it the modern way: chemicals, pesticides, fertilizers. The bright, promising bottles that corporate salesmen guaranteed would bring in a bigger yield, and the yield was bigger. Until the yield was Clara. It was a slow, creeping sickness. The doctors in the city, with their quiet, sympathetic eyes, had been blunt. We see a lot of this in agricultural communities. The literature, it's increasingly clear. Long-term exposure to certain organophosphates, compound 7. The name became a curse in their house. After the funeral, Silas did the only thing he knew how to do. He declared war. He buried his grief under a mountain of work, not just tilling the land, but cleansing it. He went organic. It was a brutal 5-year conversion. His neighbors, who had all signed big, easy contracts with Terra Prime, thought he was a fool. You can't fight progress, see? They'd say. You're living in the past. I'm living for Clara, he'd grunt, ripping out old irrigation lines. His farm became his penance, his promise. But it was a promise that was killing him. He was mortgaged to the hilt. The banks were calling. The Terra Prime conglomerate was driving down prices. His last-ditch investment in organic certification had left him broke. This harvest wasn't just a harvest. It was survival. If it failed, he would lose the farm. He would lose the last thing of Clara he had left. He was a good man, backed into an impossible corner. The perfect scapegoat. In that same town hall, sitting in the very back row, was Dr. Evelyn Reed. Evelyn, also 68, was new to town. A retiree from the U.S. Geological Survey. She had bought a small house, her plan to spend her remaining years battling aphids in her garden, not corporate malfeasance. She had come to the meeting out of simple civic curiosity, but as she looked at the EPA's map, the scientist in her, the part she had tried to bury, woke up. It was wrong. The plume was too uniform. It had spread too fast, from a single point source to the entire reservoir, in less than a week. And the location. It didn't account for the small surface eddy that should have pushed it east, not west. The data, she thought, with a familiar sickening lurch in her stomach, wasn't just data. It was a narrative. It was too neat. This is how it starts, she whispered to herself. Evelyn was not a hero. In her own mind, she was a coward. She had retired early from the USGS, not with a gold watch, but with a cloud of shame. 10 years ago, on a big case in Appalachia, a mining conglomerate had been poisoning a watershed. Evelyn had found the data, but the political pressure, from senators, from lobbyists, from her own department heads who warned her about budget cuts, had been immense. She hadn't lied. But she hadn't told the whole truth. She had softened her report. She'd used phrases like inconclusive and further study needed. The corporation had used that further study time to cover its tracks. The pollution had continued for 2 more years before an independent journalist finally broke the story. Children got sick. Evelyn's softened report was held up as proof of a cover-up. She hadn't been fired. She had simply been rendered irrelevant. She had failed her science. She had failed her oath. And she had run here, to this quiet valley, to forget. Now, as she watched Silas Croft, his face a mask of agony, she saw the ghost of her past. She saw a new, inconclusive report being written, this time in the faces of the jury-like town. The first call she made was not to a lawyer. It was to the hospital. Frank Miller, Clara's brother, was Evelyn's age. He was a retired mechanic who lived in a small cabin on the creek, just downstream from Silas. He was the one who had first reported the dead fish. He was now in the ICU. Evelyn used her old USGS credentials to get past the charge nurse. The doctor was young, exhausted. It's acute kidney failure, Dr. Reed. His system is flooded. We're running dialysis, but we're filtering blind. We don't know the exact compound. This, compound 7, is a family of chemicals. If we had a pure sample, we could synthesize a targeted chelating agent. Without it, he shook his head. He's not responding. 48 hours, maybe less. He doesn't have time for a new study. The clock was ticking. Evelyn drove her old Subaru down the long gravel drive to Croft Organics. The farm was quiet. The closed EPA order sign, stark yellow against the green fields. She found Silas in his barn, sitting on an overturned bucket, staring at an old, faded photograph of a smiling woman. Mr. Croft, Evelyn said softly. He looked up, his eyes dead. Come to take another sample? Or just to spit on me? I don't think you did it, she said. He stood up, his rage a physical force. I don't give a damn what you think. You scientists. You and your data. You come in here with your clipboards and your machines, and you talk in numbers. You told us Compound 7 was safe. My Clara is dead. Now you tell me I used it. You're all liars. You're poison. The map is wrong, Evelyn said, standing her ground. The hydrology. The dispersion pattern. It's too fast. It's moving like it's under pressure, and it's ignoring the surface topography. It's not acting like a surface spill. Silas just stared at her, his face a wall of grief. Mr. Croft, she pressed. I am a hydrologist. I specialize in groundwater. I think the EPA is testing the wrong thing. They're looking at the creek. They need to be looking under your farm. Way under. Get off my land, he whispered, his voice shaking. Get off. Before I make you. Evelyn left. But she didn't stop. She spent the next day at the county records office, not in the EPA files, but in the archives. She pulled the geological surveys from the 1,970 seconds, the old, dusty maps, drawn long before Terra Prime existed, and there it was. It wasn't a simple valley. It was a karst formation. The bedrock was porous limestone, a honeycomb of caves and channels, and the maps showed a deep, hidden aquifer that flowed directly under the entire region, a subterranean river. It's not a creek, she whispered, her fingers tracing the line. It's a highway. Terra Prime, she realized, wasn't built on the clean side of the valley. It was built directly on top of the aquifer's main recharge zone. And Silas's farm, the old survey noted a geological anomaly. A fissure, a natural crack in the bedrock where the deep aquifer water, under pressure, could be forced to the surface. My God, she breathed. They're not spilling. They're injecting. It was a common and monstrously cynical practice. Why pay millions for chemical treatment when you can drill a deep well injection site and pump your toxic waste thousands of feet underground? Out of sight, out of mind, until it found a chimney. Silas's farm wasn't the source. It was the symptom. He was the victim. The poison was bubbling up from below, contaminating his soil, and then running off into the creek. He wasn't the polluter. He was the first casualty. She was about to call the EPA with her theory when her phone buzzed. It was a text from a local reporter. Dr. Reed, do you have a comment on this? It was a link to the local newspaper's website. The headline was a gut punch. Terra Prime. Exec accuses disgraced scientist of personal vendetta. The executive was David Vance, a local boy, 40-something, who had clawed his way out of the valley to a big corporate job and had returned as Terra Prime's VP of operations. He was the town's golden child. And he was standing at a podium, a kind, concerned look on his face. We are deeply troubled, Vance said in the video, that a scientist with a documented history of, let's call it, data manipulation, is attempting to interfere with a federal investigation. Dr. Evelyn Reed was forced into early retirement from the USGS for this very reason. For softening data, she is, sadly, not a credible source. We believe she holds a personal grudge against corporations like ours. And she is now harassing a grieving, broken man, Mr. Croft, to further her own agenda. It was a character assassination. It was brilliant. By noon, the second blow came. A sheriff's deputy served her with a temporary restraining order. Filed by David Vance on behalf of Terra Prime, she was legally barred from contacting Mr. Croft or coming within 500 yards of the EPA-sealed crime scene, Silas's farm. She was locked out. Her credibility was shot. The town, desperate for a villain, now had two. Silas, the poisoner, and Evelyn, the lying scientist. She went to the hospital. Frank had less than 24 hours. I need that sample, Evelyn muttered to herself, her hands shaking, not in fear, but in a cold, white-hot fury. She had let this happen once. She would be damned if she let it happen again. She drove her Subaru straight through the EPA order sign on Silas's property. He met her on the porch, his face a mask of thunder. "I heard what they said," he growled. "You're a fake. Just like all the rest. I told you to get off my land. The restraining order." "To hell with the restraining order, Silas," Evelyn shouted, shoving the geological map into his chest. "To hell with David Vance. And to hell with my past. Yes, I made a mistake. I was a coward. I let men like Vance intimidate me, and people got sick. That is why I am here." He looked at the map, confused. "They're not framing you, you stubborn old mule," she yelled, her voice breaking. "They're using you. They are pumping poison into the ground 5 miles away. And it is coming up. Up. Through that old fissure your granddaddy used to call the wishing well. It's contaminating your soil from below. They are using your land, your reputation, and your wife's memory as a chemical toilet." Silas stared at her, his mind slowly connecting the dots. The wishing well. A small spring on the back 40 that always bubbled, even in a drought. "They are counting on you to be a stubborn old fool," Evelyn pressed, her voice dropping, her eyes pleading. "They're counting on you to be broken. They're counting on you to roll over and die. David Vance is letting Frank die. Just to protect his bottom line." She pointed to her car. "I have a deep earth drill in my trunk. I need one sample. From that fissure, it's the only way to prove it. They'll arrest me. They'll probably arrest you. But Frank will die if we do nothing. So, you can either sit here and let them win, or you can pick up a shovel and help me fight back." Silas looked at the photograph of Clara in his hand. He looked at the barn, the memorial he had built. He looked at Evelyn, a woman as broken and furious as he was. "Get your drill," he said, his voice a low growl. "Let them come." They raced to the back 40, the mud churning under the Subaru's wheels. The fissure was a small, bubbling pool, the water coated with an oily, rainbow sheen. It stank of chemicals. It took 20 minutes. The drill bit, an extension on a heavy-duty motor, whined in protest as it bored into the earth. 10 feet, 20, 30, now, Evelyn yelled. She pulled the sample canister, a long tube that trapped the water from deep below. It was thick, dark, and foul. The wail of sirens cut through the air. David Vance's black SUV led the way, 2 sheriff's cars right behind. "You're done, Reed," Vance yelled, stepping out, his face a mask of triumph. "You violated a restraining order. And you, Croft. Aiding and abetting. Tainting a crime scene. It's over. It's over for you, you son of a bitch," Silas said, walking toward him, holding the canister. "That won't hold up in court," Vance sneered. "It's contaminated. Fruit of a poisonous tree. You're both finished. Maybe," Evelyn said, breathing hard, her hands covered in mud. "Which is why I called a full emergency session of the town council. An hour ago. They're all waiting for us. You wanted a show, Mr. Vance? You're going to get one." The town hall was now a pressure cooker. The sheriff stood at the back. Vance, his corporate lawyer, and the EPA agent sat at the front, whispering angrily. Evelyn and Silas, dirty and defiant, stood at the podium. "You're out of order, Dr. Reed," the mayor said. "This," Evelyn said, ignoring him, "is a 3D map of the aquifer under our valley." She projected the old geological map. "And this," she projected a new slide, "is a water flow model. Terra Prime injects their waste. Here, a red dot appeared. The groundwater flows. Here. And it comes up. Here. At the fissure. On Mr. Croft's farm." "Lies," Vance shouted. "She has no proof. This," Evelyn said, holding up the canister, "is a sample taken 30 feet below the surface. It is not runoff. It is the source, and the concentration is 1,000 times higher than the sample from the creek. It's not leaking into the creek, Mr. Vance. It's gushing into it. Vance was pale, but still fighting. An illegally obtained sample. It's inadmissible. She faked it. I was hoping you'd say that, Evelyn said, her voice dropping, cold and final. Because I didn't have to fake anything. You see, when a corporation files for a state building permit, they have to submit a geological impact assessment. They are required to identify all groundwater risks. It's public record. It just takes someone knowing where to look. She clicked to her final slide. It was a scanned document. A Terra Prime geological report. A report that identified the hidden aquifer. A report that identified the fissure on the Croft property. A report that warned of a high risk of artesian upwelling if injection wells were used. And at the bottom, a clear, confident signature. David Vance, VP of Operations. The room was utterly silent. The EPA agent, his face white, stood up and walked over to the sheriff. He whispered in his ear. David Vance saw them coming. He looked at Evelyn, his golden boy mask melting away, revealing the terrified, cornered fraud underneath. They knew, Silas said, his voice thick with a terrible dawning realization. They knew. They let Clara die, and they knew this would happen. They chose me. The sheriff put a hand on David Vance's shoulder. Mr. Vance, I think you'd better come with us. The federal case shut Terra Prime down in 6 weeks. The revelations from Evelyn's data, now confirmed by a federal team, were used to synthesize the exact antidote for Compound 7. Evelyn sat by Frank's hospital bed, watching the slow, steady drip of the IV. Silas was on the other side, holding his brother-in-law's hand. Frank's eyes fluttered open. He looked at Silas. See, he whispered, his voice a dry rasp. I'm here, Frank, Silas said, tears streaming down his face. I'm here. You stubborn old fool, Frank whispered. Took you long enough. Spring came to the valley. The water was running clean. The creek was being restocked with fish. The closed dad sign on Silas's farm was gone, replaced by a new hand-painted one. Croft and Reed. Evelyn, her hands now stained with real dirt, was on her knees, arguing with Silas. I'm telling you, Silas, the nitrogen to phosphorus ratio is better in fish emulsion, she said, holding up a watering can. Nonsense. Silas grunted, holding a bag of his own compost. Clara always swore by simple manure. It's about the soul of the soil, woman, not the ratios. You, sir, are a scientific Neanderthal, Evelyn said, smiling. And you, Silas said, his own rare smile cracking his weathered face, are a damn nuisance. He looked out over the fields, green and full of promise. The farm was safe. Clara's memory was clean. He had lost his war on chemicals. But in the end, with a little help...
If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to support the channel so we can create more videos. Thank you, everyone.